room that we're going to be talking about to take you to this experience when I was 11, maybe hitting on 12. Where this took place would have been right up here upstairs. It would have been above my bedroom, actually. So this upstairs room right here, we called the music room. These pictures are from a photo shoot that was taken in, I think, 2007. So I would have been 17 in these pictures. This is the shape of that part of the building that sticks out. That's on the top floor. Part of what we are going to be talking about is this couch right here, or one of these couches that I'm pretty sure they all look the same that we had in this room. And there's an orb, but we'll talk about that later. I have mixed opinions on orbs, and I know a lot of people say they're just dust and stuff like that. So I just don't want anything to stop me from doing this today. But I'm about to tell the story, and it's such a huge deal. And it's just like, I'm doing this. I'm fucking doing this. Okay? So I'm sitting on the couch in this music room, listening to music. I think I was probably listening to like Jimi Hendrix or something like that. I'm sitting on the couch on this side of the room. I'm staring over to like the window area across the room. You know, that window that's like on the side before, you know, slopes around or whatever like that. And I just remember I was staring in that direction. Okay. Listening to music. Sat down on the couch, and which was weird in the first place, man, because usually I would just be dancing around. I would be running around, dancing around, just not sitting down. And I'm looking over this direction of the room, right? And the best I can describe it is that I went into a trance-like state. And I had a vision. Okay. Now, sometimes you'll hear me say I had a vision or whatever like that. And when I say that, usually I'm talking about like I had a psychic flash of an image or of a little segment. And that's what I kind of mean usually, like 90% of the time, 99% of the time when I say I had a vision, that's what I mean. I just had a psychic flash, you know. And this was a trance-like state in which I had a vision. And never before in my life, and never since, have I ever entered a straight up trance-like state and had a vision again. Okay. I was in a trance. I sat there on that couch, stared, and zoned out to a point that I have never, ever experienced before or since then. And it's like this comes to me. And I'm not saying it came from any specific direction. I'm just saying it was like it just came to me from the direction I was staring at in my vision, that it like consumed me, and like I had this vision, okay? It was an aisle of a supermarket. And there was a boy of probably about 14 or 15, I'm going to say probably like 15, standing there in the aisle, okay? He had his hands in his pockets. He was wearing blue jeans, sneakers, right? He had his hands in his pockets. He was wearing a white t-shirt, and he had over top of it a jacket. It was like a cotton, like heather gray. Nothing of what he was wearing looked like anything that, you know, especially like the hooded jacket. Like it didn't look like what we've got today, right? This was like a well-fitting, you know, hooded zip jacket. Like this was not any like oversized, like the jeans weren't no oversized weird or stuff. They weren't tight, you know, like crazy styles that we have today and stuff. And you got to remember, this happened in the early 2000s that I had this vision, okay? And I just remember thinking the clothes and the supermarket aisle and what I could see of like the floor and just, you know, the aisle behind, you know, the aisle rack thing, like behind him that had, you know, products on it or whatever. Like, I just remember thinking that that did not look like it was current. So he's standing there in the aisle, his hands in his pockets. I remember exactly what he looked like in the face. And I won't describe what he looked like, but he had a buzz cut. His hair was very short in a buzz cut. And hands in his pockets, just standing there staring at, I don't know what. He was just staring, like, I mean, it would have been just like the shelves on the other side of the aisle in front of him that he was staring at. But, you know, I'm looking at him and his eyes are void. He has eyes, but they're empty and void, like ain't nobody home. Like, he's standing there and ain't nobody home, dude. Over the years, I have concluded that, and you know, any departures like this that you don't agree with and like think that I'm like wrong about some shit, that's fine, you know, but I'm just telling you what over the years I have concluded and what it was giving, you know, like the atmosphere of the vision, okay, was that lights on, nobody home. He ain't there. Like, he's standing there, he ain't there. He ain't seeing what's in front of him. He's not in the building, okay? Over the years, I've concluded that in that moment, right, the reason that his eyes looked void is because he was traveling somewhere. And where was he traveling? You know? Did I, in this trance-like state, pick up this transmission from him? Pick up this signal? The vision ended when he kind of came back to his body and he looked over, he turned his head and he looked over to some people who were down the aisle, like beyond him, you know, and I got the impression that whoever he was looking at, like, he might have been with his mother and he might have been with a younger sibling, because when he looked over, his eye shot was like looking at somebody who wasn't very tall, you know, somebody who wasn't very tall, so like a kid or something, caught his eye, caught his attention as soon as he came back to his body, and he turned his head and looked, and that's when the vision ended. That was it. And I came back to myself, sitting on the couch, like, what the hell just happened? You know, because like I said, I ain't never had a vision like that. I've never entered a trance state and had a vision like that ever. So last night I was thinking about how to best explain this. That was my introduction. The first time I met, the first time I saw the main entity. The second entity that I know of that I ever met while I was there and lived in that building. I don't know how he could have been connected to the building. How could he have been a ghost there? If it was really a vision from the late 70s or the early 80s, you know, based on his attire and based on the look of the supermarket, you know, at that time, like in the late 70s, early 80s, like, I ain't really too sure, like, what my childhood home had become, you know. Like, I'm pretty sure they said that it became a nursing home after it was done being a hospital. I think in the late 80s, maybe even the mid 80s, was when the old man, the old couple that my dad bought the building from, that was when they were like having a tanning salon in there. Like, you know what I mean? So at some point this building was abandoned and left to rot pretty much, you know. So when did that occur? It looks like the last items that were left there and stuff were from that point, from like the mid 70s. So I'm saying, if he was a ghost that was like bound to the place or something, why was he contacting me from a supermarket aisle? And there's always the potential that, you know, if he was 15 at the time of that vision, say that vision was 1980, right? If you subtract that, so that would be 1965 that he would have been born, right? Yeah, And the dead files that I was telling you guys about, those are the dates that it kind of covered. I think there were entries, files from the 1950s, and most of them were from the 60s. It is possible that if that vision took place in 1980, and most certainly if that vision was from 1980-ish, most certainly he could have been born in the hospital, right? Absolutely. But could he have, like, could the story of his ghostliness be that he was like, he died there, you know? Because he clearly didn't die in that vision. He wasn't dead, you know? He was just standing in a supermarket aisle, astrally traveling and projecting himself for some reason. Because you know how I said that ghosts, you can see the ghosts of people who are still alive, and is it astral travel then? Well, I mean, you know, in this case, this was a vision from like 1980. Okay, so it's not giving alive, right? And I have reason to believe that he was absolutely not alive, that he didn't live very long past the time that I would have seen him in that vision. I later had another vision, not a trance vision, okay, but it was a psychic flash, a little bit longer than a psychic flash, a vision I had of him, and he was in, I assume, his house, in his kitchen, alone. It wasn't a grisly scene. I don't think I even saw any blood or anything. Like, there really was no indication of what the hell had happened to him, but it was him, and he was laying there on the floor, kind of sitting up against a little bit the kitchen cabinets where the sink was in this kitchen, and just propped up by the shoulders, you know, shoulders and up, basically. He was dead, but I don't know. He was either dead or dying at that moment because his eyes were kind of open, and he died somehow. And the sense that I got, first of all, there was no indication of how he had died, but the sense that I got was that it was accidental, or that it wasn't anybody's fault, like nobody intended for that to happen, you know what I mean? So I don't know if other people were involved or how he even died. I don't know. All I have is a vision, basically just a flash. That's all I have of him laying there on the floor, and there was no indication of how he had died. You know, it's just very strange. And so it's like, if he was a ghost, I don't see how he was attached to my house, to the hospital. You know, I mean, if he lived around there, most certainly he could have been born there. I mean, if this vision had looked like it took place like in the 60s or something, I'd have no trouble believing that he either died in the hospital or that his body was taken to the hospital after he died or something like that. And that's why he's like a ghost there, you know, communicating with me. But the thing is like, you got to bear in mind, right? He was in a supermarket. Was he even a ghost? Because I can tell you that I never saw his ghost. Not his ghost, I don't think. And there's a lot more to this. That if I'm going to go chronologically, I'm not going to tell that right now, you know. But I never saw his ghost just kicking it around my house. Okay. But I can tell you that after I had that vision, I remember getting up from the couch and going on about my afternoon, feeling a little weird. And I remember like going downstairs and specifically I remember going down the hall to go out the side door, like, because my dad was out there or something like that, and I was going to go out there and just, like, you know, and see what he was up to or whatever. I just remember that afternoon and feeling kind of weird after that. But that's it. That's all I remember from that whole span of time, because after I had this vision and stuff, I just sort of went on about life, but it did have a major impact on me. And it was kind of like with meeting the first entity. It was like we were introduced, and then, you know, he really did not pop back up until I was like 11 or 12 or 13 type shit, dude. And I don't know why things popped off around that time. Why was there sort of a lull in activity, and specifically in seeing ghosts, right? Because that's, even though I'm pretty sure like ghosts and the entities are not the same thing, I still hinge everything around and the level of activity and crazy shit around like seeing a ghost. Like with my eyeballs, I saw a ghost type shit. That's what I kind of gauge everything around, you know. Not that, you know, sounds matter, or I was thinking about this, don't matter. I was thinking about this last night in bed. Okay, so if you see a ghost, right? Okay, you see a ghost, you saw a ghost. If after that in your home and stuff, like there's other strange occurrences like noises or voices or things moving around, or just oddities, okay? Oddities, right? It's like people assume that the ghost that they saw must be the one who's like making the sounds or moving things around, right? It's like that's what people assume, dude. But what if it ain't? What if it's not? What if it's not the ghost that you saw who's moving stuff when you ain't seeing no ghost? Do you know what I'm saying, dude? What if it's not the same thing? We know so little. I feel like at this point, as I sit here today in this time in history that I'm alive right now, in this time in history, like I feel like we know so little about fucking everything, dude. Like, because we see only a small sliver of the frequency band that is color, that is the frequency of reality that we're able to perceive is so tiny. It's such a tiny slice out of the spectrum. There are things going on in dimensions above us, below us, and with our dimension that we can't even see. We can't see it, but I think proximity does matter, right? So I think that it's possible that there are echoes throughout the layers of these planes of existence, of these dimensions. I think that we can send an echo out through it and affect what's above us and around us. And I think that likewise, what is above us in dimensionally can echo into our plane of existence. So the first entity that I met when I was 5, right, became known to me by a name very early on. This second entity, this main entity, never had a name. Back when I was a kid, back when I was 11, 12, I would be curious and I would wonder, like, you know, who is that? Like, who is that? I do wonder what his name is. You know, I wonder, what is his story? You know, I wonder all these things. But I never came to know him by a name. After I had the vision, okay, I went on with my life, and some other really, really, really weird shit went down that it was of a supernatural nature, but I can definitively tell you that it was not related to, like, it was not no ghost that was haunting my house. Like, it wasn't no ghost haunting my house. The only relation it might have even had, even vaguely, to my house was the theory of my house being like a power station or something that outside entities could tap into. Like, that's it. Like, that's the only fucking connection even possible with the things that happened when I was 12. And I will not talk about that. I will not be discussing that because I do not consider it related at all, okay, to my childhood home and any facet of an important story that I've got to tell about that type shit. Like, I will never be telling a story about the shit that went down when I was 12 of a supernatural nature. And I put it that way because interdimensional beings and shit like that, like, I do believe that is real. And while you could say, yeah, that is supernatural, right? you know, put some respect on it type shit. I'm just gonna say that whole thing that went down was fucking sus. It was bizarre, and I will not be talking about it, and it doesn't have anything to do, in my estimation, with my childhood home, besides being maybe that it was like a power station for outside entities. That's fucking it, okay? It had nothing to do with my childhood home, okay, at all. So I ain't even gonna talk about that. But some shit did go down when I was like 12, okay? And during that whole segment of time, like, this vision that I had had of this boy, like, it was in the back of my mind, but I wasn't really thinking about it. I wasn't really thinking about it during this time, because what was going on was like overriding any of that. And it was only when I was about 13 that I would really start to revisit this vision and think, like, what the fuck was that? You know? And it was around the time when I was like 13 when Raj, the entity, the first entity, was coming back around again too. And he was like around and shit, just randomly. You know, he would pop in and be like, and it would be like, Raj. And, you know, I remember I would be like, oh, Raj, you know, like, that was the sentiment of it. Like, he would just be around, but he had not been around at all, like, communicating with me at all and busting in at all, from the age of 5 to like, from the age 5, 6 to like 12, 13. Like, he had not been around. Okay. Well, he was around, but he had not been communicating. And so, dude, so I'm probably 11, 12. I have this vision, okay, of the boy. And then that crazy shit, you know, when I was 12. And then when I'm like 13 or hitting on 13, Raj comes back. And then when I was like 13, 14, something like that, a whole ton of other shit was going down that was unrelated to Raj or the second entity, the boy. And completely unrelated to that. I mean, there's so many things, and I can't get into it right now, because time don't be permitting it, really, okay? But that's a chronological thing. You know, but I had to tell you about the boy in the vision right now, because that happened when I was like 11. I had to tell you this chronologically. So I had the vision, and nothing really went down with that for like a year and a half or something, okay? When all of this shit kicked off, dude, it didn't stop for the whole time that I lived there. For the rest of the time that I lived there, to the age of 18, shit didn't die down, okay? And after I left and moved out, you know, they would say that strange things would happen. Objects would be moving around by themselves, and like, they would just be like, you would leave something somewhere and you'd come back in an area that wasn't nobody doing a fucking thing in, and these objects would be moved, you know. And it was like, there was just this, my parents said there was a sense of sort of, not anger or anything like that, but it just sort of just like this like sadness kind of, because I was not there anymore, you know what I mean? And strange things kept happening, you know, with them there, just like it always had. But it took on this odd sense of like sadness. And even when I moved out and lived somewhere vastly different, you know, way far away from my childhood home, like, this boy, the entity, was still present. Didn't live there anymore. I was like 20 years old, and he still had power, okay? But I have an interesting story to tell you about, you know, like, how that whole thing played out and the status of it today, right? I have a lot to explain on that front, but I am still trying to go chronologically, because because the things that happened throughout those years from 13 to 18, that 5-year span there, part of me cannot believe that I actually was able to sit here today and tell you about the vision of the boy and the entity associated. And when I had this vision and I saw this boy, the only sense that I got from it was how incredibly familiar he looked. He looked so familiar, and I can still see his face. I still see the details of his face. How familiar he looked. And because I didn't know his name or anything, that's how I would refer to him, to myself, in the following years. The familiar. That's how I would refer to him. Raj didn't come to me in the form of anything. Raj was a disembodied spirit that did have a name that, he gave me or whatever. But, he was not a person, as far as I know. This was in the form of a boy, the familiar. And for that reason, I have to assume that at one point in time, he lived. I feel like I accomplished a lot in this session today, and I can't even believe that I've shared this. That is the story of me being introduced to, of me meeting what I have been referring to as the second entity, or the main entity, the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. And we have a lot of ground to cover from here.